Welcome to Calling in the Dark, the show where I beckon you, the viewers, and my guest into the darkness to share some of the internet's most frightening tales and stories. With me today, I've got J.M. Fopple.
What's up?
How are you with scary stories, sir?
Not great. I'll be honest. I hate scary anything. I don't play a ton of horror games, and I love video games and scary movies, especially. Like, there's only two options when it comes to scary movies, at least to me, is either it's bad and I regret spending my money or wasting my time, or
Same.
two, I get scared and I don't like either possibility.
Well, then why'd you agree to be on the show?
It'll be fine. It'll be fun. It's
Oh my gosh. All right, so the story I've got for you today is titled "There's Something Haunting Eastern European Countryside. Don't Let It See You," and it's written by Morning Owl. So it's a creepypasta. And the thing with creepypasta is like, yeah, they're beyond belief sometimes, but like there's always that like thing where it's just like it could be real, you know?
Yeah, okay.
All right, so let's get into this. All right. For those not accustomed to it, life in rural Eastern Europe can be very lonely and isolating. I spent all of my teenage life and most of my childhood in London, but recently, about a year ago, we were forced to move back to the old country due to financial reasons. I couldn't have been older than 3 or 4 when we first transitioned to the UK, so my memories of my hometown were foggy at best. An old apartment complex in the middle of an industrial district isn't exactly the most scenic place to grow up either, but though definitely a drab at times. It always felt alive. There was always something to do, and more interesting parts of town were just a short ride away. Here, there are only grasslands stretching out for miles in whichever direction I look, not to mention the 4-hour drive between me and the nearest city. For the record, I don't have a license. Most of my days out here are spent helping dad and trying to find a decent internet connection, which is close to impossible. You have no idea how many attempts it took to post this. Oh my god, I fucking hate that. Like, internet troubles are scary in and of itself, especially
for real. I think legitimately, I think slow Wi-Fi is worse than no Wi-Fi.
honestly.
I would rather know that I can't get anything done or like do anything than like be teased with the idea. I
Exactly. And it's just your freaking frustration just builds up. You're like,
absolutely.
Wi-Fi.
And before we go any further, so like I'm actually able to picture this pretty well, not like to the T, but when I was a freshman in high school, uh, between freshman and sophomore year, I went to Europe actually and
Wow.
stayed with a family in an outer part of Wales. I don't exactly know where that is, like geographically, like to London and all that stuff, but it was like, I mean, you're like passing cows in the pasture and stuff, and the house was a good bit away from the city and stuff. So this is actually able to picture it pretty well.
No internet connection?
Oh well, so this was before. This would have been, everyone would have had cell phones by then, but it wouldn't have been like super simple to like look up things on the internet. So it was probably before my being spoiled with fast internet.
Let's get back into this.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been much of an extrovert, but having nobody to talk or relate to takes a toll on you. The local population is primarily comprised of people past their 60s. The last family with a kid closer to my age had apparently moved near a decade ago, which, yeah, you can definitely see why. Unfortunately, as you probably already guessed, boredom has been the worst thing that I've ever had to contend with. Boredom hasn't been the worst thing I've ever had to contend with, not even close. I remember when I first, other than slow Wi-Fi.
Slow Wi-Fi is the
first yeah, fuck yeah. I remember when I first saw her. It was still technically summer at the time, so evenings were tolerable, if not exactly warm. Dad and I were taking a walk along the dirt road that connects the village to the nearest highway. He was talking about how I needed to hold out for a few more years and that we would be able to move again once we save enough money. The, the prospect of spending literal years trapped in some desolate helmet in the middle of nowhere isn't exactly assuring. But with him getting older and mom's disabilities, I can't just abandon them either. They are by no means perfect parents, but they have always tried their best, and I appreciate them for it. Oh, that's kind of nice. I would have been like, deuces.
I'd like to think that I'm like him, but I'm probably much more like, yeah, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, I love my parents and everything, man, but sometimes you just gotta go on your own.
Oh yeah, I probably visit home about like twice, like once or twice a year, and it's not super far, but I had to, I just had to be away, and it's nothing
Yeah,
against them. It was just had to be on my own.
I feel it. I feel it. But props to
Yeah,
the person
absolutely.
in the story for sticking around.
Yeah.
Props. I remember looking over at my father, only to notice something in the distance past his shoulder. I strained my eyes. The gloom was far too dense to fully penetrate, but I could definitely distinguish the outline of someone standing amidst the tall grass, towering above it. The figure was that of a woman, a very tall and lanky woman. Her proportions weren't impossible, but they were intimidating, especially coupled with the slanted stance and the fact that she just stood there, swaying like a willow in the windstorm. That is fucking creepy.
Yeah,
That is
I'm
creepy.
like imagining it. It just like gets worse.
Like anywhere, any scenery or like any place that you can imagine, that's just creepy.
Yeah, it already makes me. It already gives me like Slender Man vibes.
Yeah, and as slender woman, fuck it.
Yeah,
Yeah. That glance over his shoulder as well, but then I looked back at me, but then he looked back at me confused. What is it? He asked. I was taken aback by the question that I didn't know how to respond. How did he miss the giant woman standing in the middle of the field directly behind him? I watched as the imposing silhouette suddenly began to descend, almost as if being swallowed by the earth itself, before
oh,
disappearing beneath the grass entirely. Typical story, though. This is so cliche. It's just like, oh, yeah, obviously you're the only one that could see this. Like,
yeah. I
everybody
saw it.
else
It
is going to miss
disappeared.
it. Yep,
Yeah,
everybody thinks you're crazy now. Like, all right.
yeah.
So once I finally managed to articulate what I had seen, Dad cut our walk short and we jogged home. There is nobody that lives there, not that even comes close to matching that description. But it certainly wasn't beyond the realm of possibility that some creepy tall woman was wandering the steps at night. Weirdos aren't exclusive to the big city, you know. True. The freaks come out at night. I felt nervous whenever I had to go out for the next few days, but the odd encounter eventually slipped my mind. Neither of us ever told Mom her to blow the whole thing since we didn't want her to blow the whole thing out of proportion. Besides, she rarely left the house anyways. I had all but forgotten about the woman on the step. That is, until about a week or so later. We were called over by an old couple that lives at the edge of town, conveniently right by the same road. The request wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but one of their goats had croaked during the night. Since both of them were in their 80s, they needed our help to drag it out of the pen. We did as they asked, and we were rewarded for our efforts with coffee and toast. Mmm, coffee sounds good right now.
Yeah.
It
And,
was then,
also toast is just underrated. I don't think I have enough toast, like just like buttered toast or like jam toast, something like that.
oh yeah,
Like, I don't think I give toast enough love.
that's true. Honestly, I would take toast over something like crazy sweet, like cookies or something.
Yeah.
But that sounds good with coffee. Fuck yeah. It was then that the wife said something to me that I'll never forget. I will do my best to translate. The old coot doesn't believe me, but I swear on our grandchildren's lives that I saw someone walking down the old path before I went to bed last night. At first, I thought it could have been you, but the girl was much, much taller. Tallest woman I've ever seen. The way she walked was odd too, like she was hurt, limping her way down to town. Oh my gosh, I got chills reading that. Just imagining this going on, and you just see this big ass woman in the middle of the night, just like walking weird with like a limp.
Yeah, I get that. I'm still getting very like cliche story though. Like suddenly you're validated, like nobody else sees it, but then you're suddenly validated by another person who is you probably could believe, but you're not 100% sure because
Yeah,
they're 80 years old.
exactly. I think it'll all make sense, or they could just go the path where like nobody ever knows, like the author or whatever narrator keeps it to themselves. So,
Yeah.
all right. Dad and I looked at each other from across the table. He chimed in on my behalf. What do you think it could have been? In hindsight, I am thankful that he stopped me from confessing that I'd seen the woman too. We would have likely been accused of leading her back to the settlement. As soon as I was about to find out, folk around these parts love having someone else to blame for their misfortunes. I don't know. She's not from around here, that's for sure. If you ask me, she's probably the reason our animals keep dying. Outsiders have been a bad omen. Be quiet, you hag. The man and his daughter aren't here.
Shit.
The man and his daughter, that's how couples talk to each other, you know? My parents talk to each other like that. They don't say old hag, but it's something
Yeah, I
close.
guess I get that.
Yeah.
I guess that was just a bit jarring.
All right. The man and his daughter aren't here to listen to your crazy stories. The husband finally had a chance to intervene, which, after some more back and forth, developed into a domestic dispute. We thanked the elderly couple for their hospitality and promptly excused ourselves, though I doubt either of them noticed. Okay, so he took that from like, okay, we could kind of believe the old lady, to like now is like, oh, she's crazy.
Yeah.
She's in her moods.
That went from like 0 to 60 real quick.
Yeah, I'm happy he didn't confess, or she didn't confess either,
Yeah.
because then the dad would have been like, "Nah, you crazy, fam."
So at this point, they still think it's human, though. So that's what I think is interesting, is because I was still getting very Slender Man kind of supernatural thing, but it seems like they both are still under the impression that it's just a really tall girl.
Yeah.
So that's what's interesting about the story.
Well, I mean, she says that she saw her like sink into the fields or whatever. So I mean, that gives you a hint that it's like it's
Yeah,
not
not
human.
yeah. So not like it's just like a supernatural being or something like that, but that there's something to her that at least it's not like we're talking about like the chupacabra or something like that.
Oh yeah,
We're talking about something like at least almost human, or maybe something like that.
close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Over the next several weeks, more and more animals kept turning up dead. The closest thing we had to a vet couldn't determine a cause. Goats, sheep, pigs, cattle, even dogs. Animals that looked completely healthy one day were gone the next. One day, my parents and I woke up to a coop filled with dead chickens. Now, there's nothing wrong with them as far as any of us could tell, but they just lie there motionless while the ones still alive peck carelessly around them. There was talk of a plague, but the idea was quickly brushed aside. What sort of plague kills overnight with no preceding symptoms? It was almost as if they were being poisoned, which briefly became the leading theory. It was until the start of October when a shepherd found something in a small birch grove that borders the two towns. Concealed between the trees was this crude arrangement of rocks that were obviously placed there on purpose, and overlooking them was this cross between the scarecrow and a human-sized
Oh,
effigy. What's an effigy?
effigy. It's like, I don't know the exact definition, but it's usually like some kind of like sacrificial symbol, or like it's supposed to represent something, like you're burning an effigy of something, like an image of
Ah,
something, a
okay,
representation of something.
that makes sense. And a human-sized effigy made of twigs. It had a rusted cowbell dangling from its neck and a ram skull for a head. There's something about the way it just stood there, arms raised, praising something none of us could see. It just made me feel vulnerable, tiny, like there was this benevolent force perpetually looming above us. Witchcraft, somebody yelled. We've been cursed, spouted another. We scattered the rocks and burned the idol the same day. As I watched it get swallowed by the flames, I couldn't help but feel that this is exactly what the one who placed it there intended.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
I was just like, that's probably not. That was probably the worst thing you could have done.
Yeah, because like normally, like that's your first thought, right? Like something's possessed, right?
Yeah.
You burn it, but in this case, it's just like maybe they played into this person's
Yeah.
hands. Yeah. All right. I still think I still think that this is the exact moment we unknowingly doomed ourselves, and that everything that follows could have been prevented. It's too late now, though. Things only got worse as time went on. More animals kept dropping dead for no discernible reason. The bodies were piling up. We couldn't even use the meat, as we still feared that it might somehow be tainted. So we ended up just burying them outside of town. It was then when the crops, our main source, it was then the crops, our main source of income, and food started withering that things truly got desperate. Everyone became convinced that there was a witch among us. With my family being one of the most recent additions to the community,
Oh
we were
yeah.
obviously the first to fall under scrutiny. Thankfully, my dad managed to appease the growing mob by pointing out that this supposed curse had severely impacted our livelihood as well. It made no sense that we would be the ones responsible, and so accusations started to get levied, levied, levied,
Levied. I see
levied.
what it
There
is.
you go.
There you go.
Levied against the next most plausible candidate. I won't be using her real name out of respect for the poor woman, so I'll just refer to her as Maria. See, that's one of those aspects you throw in there where it's just like, okay, maybe this could be real. Like,
Right. But it's
yeah,
also like you could you could use the real name and like attempts to Google it, like weird paranormal story involving super specific name. Like, what would you turn up? Honestly.
yeah, that's true. I mean, but like just the fact that they're like going out of their way to protect somebody's identity is just
Yeah.
like, okay, that's a real thing, you know. It gives some believableness to
Yeah.
it.
Names changed. Yeah. Names changed for protection or whatever.
Yeah. Maria was about the same age as my mother, maybe slightly older. Only she'd never married nor had any kids of her own. I never really got a clear answer as to why, and I'm not about to start speculating. Could this be the witch? I'm thinking this is the witch. As you need to know that, as you need to know, all you need to know is that she'd been living in relative solitude for years, which made her a prime suspect in the eyes of the traditionalist populace. According to it, adding to it was the fact that her livestock had overall been spared, though she wasn't even the sole outlier in that regard. There's no doubt in my mind that her targeting was largely the result of pre-existing prejudice, and things were about to get a whole lot worse for her.
Ugh, yeah.
Yeah. Every day I would walk by her house and see a fresh batch of crosses carved into her door. People called her all kinds of names whenever they saw her in public. One time I even witnessed a woman throw rocks at her, which the men eagerly encouraged. That's messed up.
Yeah. That's
Yep. You might be wondering why the saner among us didn't do anything to help. The unfortunate truth is that times were already tough and nobody wanted to risk getting themselves or their loved ones implicated by proxy.
this is very The Crucible, like a story that we read in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't speak up because then you're accused, and yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that
Absolutely.
sucks.
Also, good luck getting any outside authorities to intervene. Nothing short of a murder would ever convince an officer to come out here. As it just so happens, that's exactly what it took. Time has been somewhat of a blur since the day I found her. I remember it had snowed the previous night. Everything was covered in the crisp sheets of white. I was probably on my way to the only general store that there is here. It was far too cold for a casual stroll. Suddenly, I heard the distinct intermittent jingling of what sounded like a cowbell coming from somewhere nearby. As I circled past Maria's homestead, like I always done, I saw her, displayed at the foot of her own doorstep like some perverse art exhibit. Her partially stripped body was tied to a fence post, swollen and bruised beyond recognition. Frost clung to her dark hair as it flapped in the freezing wind, obscuring disfigured features that hardly resembled a face anymore. And there it was. The same bell that we found around the idol's neck now hung from hers, attached to a hoop of rope and barbed wire knocked around by the wind. Okay?
Dang,
Things are picking up.
that sucks.
That really sucks.
Yeah. Well, so at first I was thinking that it was like the townspeople that did it, but when they said it was the same cowbell as like that hung around the effigy,
Yeah.
like now I'm thinking that's a little more playing into like the scary part of the story. But at first I thought it was the townspeople, which would be obviously super fucked up.
It could still be. It could just be their way of just like, oh, look, this is your thing, which, like,
Yeah.
I'm giving it back to her.
Ugh.
Uh,
Either way, it sucks. But
Yeah.
but I hope it wasn't the townspeople, just like kill the witch kind of thing. Like,
Poor lady, she never did nothing.
yeah.
Or so we think.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Yeah.
But-
We'll find out.
yeah.
I was so thoroughly desensitized by that point that I just turned
Oh.
around and went home. Jeez.
Oh no.
Didn't even tell my parents. Somebody did eventually call the police, but nothing
Oh.
really came out of it. There was an investigation. Suspects were questioned, but it ultimately got swept under the rug. Maria didn't even have any relatives or friends that were willing to pursue the matter further. So it was just sort of forgotten about by the time Christmas rolled around. People have their suspicions about who could have done it. Of course, it is generally assumed to have been the shepherd with the help of a few of his drinking buddies, since he's always been Maria's most outspoken detractor, even before any of this curse stuff happened. Thing is, I don't think he did it. There's a detail that I've been deliberately neglecting to mention. I wanted to get the verifiable facts out of the way first. Throughout most of the events that I've described, the aforementioned tall woman has been haunting nearly every waking moment of my life. Her presence was subtle at first, barely noticeable and easy to disregard. Maybe I could catch something swaying ominously in the distance that I couldn't fully make out. Perhaps it would be a long shadow stretching across the hallway at night, yet nobody was there to cast it. After the desecration of the ritual site, however, any semblance of subtlety was completely done away with. I saw her everywhere I looked, occupying some dim corner, a lanky figure with bluish gray complexion, draped in the traditional white dress that was several sizes too small, as though it belonged to a child. Her hair was oily and sparse, barely clinging to her scalp and leaving little of her face to the imagination. God, that fucking face. Apart from its unhealthy hue, there was nothing technically wrong with it, but the way she would just stand there and look at me with this vacant smile and wide and glassy eyes was just, honestly, I can't think of an adjective that accurately describes how repulsive it felt. Dad didn't see her. I think my mom did, but she just plain refused to acknowledge it. Maybe only women can see it. Because remember, it was the old lady that saw her.
Yeah, that's
because
true.
her mom can see her and she can see it. So
Yeah, a bit weird. So also, I didn't know that. I guess I didn't know that he could see her face, which is all the more creepy.
oh yeah.
Because that would be horrible. I would. Yeah. This.
It's disturbing when you see like anybody who's like super duper pale in the face. Like it's just, I don't know, like even when they're alive and like speaking, you see somebody with like a super pale face, it's just like disturbing to look at. But imagine this like crazy lady in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. I think my mom did, but she just plain refused to acknowledge it. Even if the disheveled woman was standing literally right there, looming over her. One time I cornered her about it, and probably realizing I was teetering on the brink of mental collapse, she told me, "Your grandmother used to say there are things out there that you like to watch but hate to be seen. Once you do, it's best to pretend like you don't." So that's what I did. I spent over 2 months pretending like the grinning entity watching us from across the room wasn't there. So she went from being on the road to in their house, and she sees her every night, everywhere. That's
Yeah, this is not. I mean, it's not turning out good for our main
Yeah.
character, whoever the like protagonist or antagonist, whatever. It's not turning out great for them. It's
yeah.
getting progressively worse, which you expect in a story, but still not good.
And then I like originally thought it was like, okay, you're having some kind of mental breakdown. You know, you're seeing this thing everywhere. But the
And
mom saying that kind of stuff, it just leads me to believe, okay, maybe there's something more.
so there's also another element to this. Like the old lady, the old man thought she was saying that she was crazy. The 80-year-old lady,
Yeah.
he said she was crazy. Which I mean, you would if you said like I see things or whatever. But the mom, she's sick, some form of sick.
Yeah.
Like they mentioned earlier in the story that she has something wrong with her.
Disabilities.
Didn't say what. Yeah, just some sort of disability. It's not told what, and so I'm wondering if like that plays into it, and there's something wrong with our protagonist or main character at least. Something like this is a reason they can see them, or like kind of World War Z, that they're the ones that are avoided.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll find out. Let's keep reading. It's like its emancipated frame wasn't the first thing that I would see whenever I skipped through the door. I wouldn't go as far as to say I got used to it. Trying to go to sleep with that thing's silhouette propped against the opposite wall never got easy. And keep in mind that I was dealing with this in parallel with everything else going on in town.
That's freaking horrible.
I know. How old are they? Like, are they going to school? Like
That's a good question. Well, I don't. There probably wouldn't be a traditional school if she's the only one even close to her age. And she mentioned she chose to stay, which makes me think she's at least like 17, 18,
yeah,
around there. I don't know.
college age or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why I'm telling you this, even though I probably shouldn't, is that the tall woman suddenly stopped appearing around the house, just a few days prior to me stumbling across Maria's body. Oh. Last week, another murderer was reported. The goat herder's wife was found in much the same state, with her battered remains tied to a tree directly outside their home and a cowbell dangling from her neck. I have a feeling that she won't be the last one. But let's summarize, shall we? I'm a teenage girl trapped in the middle of bumfuck nowhere with a homicidal ghost bitch that exclusively preys on women and may or may not be connected to the curse that's progressively decimating our livelihood.
That would suck. You would hope that she's connected, because otherwise you're just dealing with two like incredibly shitty situations.
I know.
Like coincidentally, like that would suck.
Yep. I have next to no access to the outside world, and the police can't be arsed to help. Fuck my life. And that's where the story ends.
Oh, what?
I mean, it did its thing. It says there's something out there terrorizing us, and they told us what it is.
I guess.
It didn't say they had a solution.
That's true. But like even like what it was or what happened, that's shitty. That sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was unnerving. It did its job.
You hate it, right? Because you don't have any answers, but it just leaves you wanting more. Like that's what I like about it, you know?
Well, in the Blair Witch Project, they at least die. You know, like there's at least some resolution.
Well, I mean, it looks like people are they're all gonna die eventually, the way things are going.
Well, maybe it's just killing women, so these men are just gonna be there like, oh shit, like what?
Well, I mean, their crops are dying, which is their main source of income.
They're gonna have to move eventually.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. It was pretty all right. It had me on the edge of my seat. It was creepy.
Yeah, it definitely led somewhere. So that was, it didn't turn out as as cliche, I guess, as I expected, especially with like an incredibly cliffhanger ending.
Yeah. I mean, with most like stories and stuff, like the title doesn't really give you much of like a perspective of like what happens in the story, but in this one, it gave you literally everything.
Yeah, there's something.
Just like, yeah, true. Well, anyways, man, that's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for being a guest on here.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me on.
everybody who was viewing. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.